Hello, I hope you are enjoying Low State University so far. In this video, we're going to learn more about the indicator block and the gauge block. The indicator block allows you to display a custom message on the dashboard. You also get control of the block's background color and can change it based on data coming from your devices. The gauge block allows you to display a single number attribute value. You can use this to display a single number or as a gauge, which is a speedometer-like visualization. Now, we're going to dive into the blocks to see how they work. Let's start with the indicator block. First and foremost, each of these blocks can be live or historical, and we can set the duration if needed. All the magic happens in the block data. The block data starts with a query, and we need to query an attribute value to build thresholds or a conditional based on that data later. Let's use an example. I have an environmental sensor and I would like to display the status of the temperature. If the temperature is between 65 and 75 degrees, I want a message that lets me know that everything is okay. If the temperature is below 65, I should know that things are too cold, and if above 75, too hot. Let's build this. First, I need to build a query by selecting my device and temperature. This does two things. It creates two values that I can use later. The first is value-0. If you're familiar with variables in programming or templating languages, this is simply a variable whose value will be the result of the query. If you're not as familiar, think of these as special references to your data. Every time our dashboard refreshes, we receive new data. So we need a way to represent this constant changing value. Using a reference like value0 allows us to do just this. As we add more queries, this will become value-1, -2, -3, and so on. Along with value0, we also get time0, which is the time value0 was reported. However, we won't need that for our example today. Now that we have a queried value, we can build a conditional. The conditional is your threshold. This is our if this then that logic for this block. So using our example above, we had three conditionals. So we'll need to input those conditions here. Conditions have an expression, a label, and a color. The expression is the actual logic for our condition. This is a Boolean expression that should result in true or false. If the expression results in true, the dashboard will use its respective label and color. Here, we can say if value0 is less than or equal to 65, display the label it's too cold, and display the color blue to represent this case. Next, we can do the same for our hot condition. If the temperature is greater than or equal to 75, we need the label to display it's too hot, and let's make the color red to represent hot. Okay, we have too cold and too hot, but what about when the temperature is just right? That's our default case. In some cases, you may have conditions where none of them result in true, so we can have a default label and color case. We can make good use of the default case here by only checking for too cold and too hot, and then everything else will fall under our default case, which we can assign the label of all things good and the color green. Now, we can add this to our dashboard and always know the status of our temperature. Since we covered queries and conditional, we can cover the gauge block quickly because it works in a very similar manner. The gauge block has two types, a number gauge and a dial gauge. The number gauge is very simple. It displays a number of your choosing. We can also change how the number is displayed and formatted with display rules. Pro tip. You can use the indicator block to display a number as well, but you'll get more formatting power. We can also create a dial gauge. The dial gauge is the speedometer-like chart I was talking about earlier. Just like the indicator block, we can customize the color based on conditions. We can configure the minimum and maximum value for our block. Because the gauge block only displays a single value, we only have one query, not multiple. So in our conditions, we just have one value instead of value-0 like we had in the indicator block. Here, we can build out similar conditionals for the example we saw in the indicator block. We can make the gauge blue if things are too cold, red if things are too hot, and green if they're all good. Now we have 2 more blocks under our belt. Don't hesitate to post a message in the forums. We can get you the answers you need to be successful. I'll see you in the next video.